Krishna. Good morning. Good morning, Anasuya. Good morning, Aditya.
Good morning, Rasamrta. What are we studying? I'm so excited.
So today we are going to be looking at the Bhagavad-Gita, and we're going to be on chapter 3. Let me make sure I'm not looking at it right. Yep. Chapter 3, text 12. I don't have it written on the board, so. You got it. All right. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Hare Krishna. All right, so chapter 3, text 12. Ishtan Bogan He Vo Deva Dashyanti Yagna Bhavita Ter Datan Apar Dayabyo Yo Bhukti Stena Eva Sa. Okay. Ishtan Bogan He Vo Deva Dashyanti Yagna Bhavita Tardadan Apradayabyo Yo Bhukti Stena Eva Sa. Ishtan Bogan He Vo Deva Dasyanti Yagya Bhavita Terdatan Apradayabyo Yo Bhukti Stena Eva Sa. Ishtan Bogan He Vo Deva Dasyanti Yagya Bhavita Terdatan Apardayabyo Yo Bhukti Stena Eva Sa.
Ishtan Bogan He Vo Deva
Ishtan Bogan He Vo Deva Dasyanti Yagya Bhavita Terdatan Apardayabyo Yo Bhukti Stena Eva Sa. Would anybody online like to repeat the verse? We are, hello Rukmini, we are on chapter 3, text 12.
Istan Bhagavan Ego Deva
Istan Bhagavan Ego Deva
Dasyante Yana Bhavitaha
Dasyanti Yagya Bhavita
Terdatan Abradayib Yaibohoyo Yo Bhukti Stena Eva Saha
Yo Bhukti Stena Eva Sa. Would anybody else like to repeat the verse? All right. So we're going to go to word for word. Estan, desired. Bogan, necessities of life. He, certainly. Va, unto you. Deva, the demigods. Dasyanti, award. Yagya bhavita,
Yajna bhavita.
being satisfied by the performance of sacrifices.
Being satisfied by the performance of sacrifices.
Tai,
Tai.
by them.
By them.
Datan,
Data.
things given.
Things given.
Apradaya,
Apradaya.
without offering.
Without offering.
Abhya,
Abhya.
to the demigods.
To the demigod.
Ya,
Ya.
he who.
He who.
Bhukti,
Bhukte.
enjoys. Stena,
Stay.
thief.
Thief.
Eva,
Eva.
certainly.
Certainly.
Sa,
Sa.
is he.
Is he.
Translation. In charge of the various necessities of life, the demigods, being satisfied by the performance of yagya, sacrifice, supply all the necessities to man. But he who enjoys these gifts without offering them to the demigods in return is certainly a thief. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Prabhupada. The demigods are authorized supplying agents on behalf of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. Therefore, they must be satisfied by the performance of prescribed yagyas. In the Vedas, there are different kinds of yagyas prescribed for different kinds of demigods, but all are ultimately offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For one who cannot understand what the Personality of Godhead is, sacrifice to the demigods is recommended. According to the different material qualities of the persons concerned, different types of yagyas are recommended in the Vedas. Worship of different demigods is also on the same basis, namely according to different qualities. For example, the meat eaters are recommended to worship the goddess Kali, the ghastly form of material nature, and before the goddess, the sacrifice of animals is recommended. But for those who are in the mode of goodness, the transcendental worship of Vishnu is recommended. But ultimately, all yagyas are meant for gradual promotion to the transcendental position. For ordinary men, at least 5 yagyas known as Pancha Mahayagya are necessary. One should know, however, that all the necessities of life that the human society requires are supplied by the demigod agents of the Lord. No one can manufacture anything. Take, for example, all the eatables of human society. These eatables include grains, fruits, vegetables, milk, sugar, etc. For the persons in the mode of goodness, and also eatables for the non-vegetarians like meats, etc., none of which can be manufactured by men. Then again, take for example heat, light, water, air, etc., which are also necessities of life. None of them can be manufactured by the human society. Without the Supreme Lord, there can be no profuse sunlight, moonlight, rainfall, breeze, etc., without which no one can live. Obviously, our life is dependent on supplies from the Lord. Even for our manufacturing enterprises, we require so many raw materials like metal, sulfur, mercury, manganese, and so many essentials, all of which are supplied by the agents of the Lord, with the purpose that we should make proper use of them to keep ourselves fit and healthy for the purpose of self-realization, leading to the ultimate goal of life, namely liberation from the material struggle for existence. This aim of life is attained by performance of yagyas. If we forget the purpose of human life and simply take supplies from the agents of the Lord for sense gratification and become more and more entangled in material existence, which is not the purpose of creation, certainly we become thieves, and therefore we are punished by the laws of material nature. A society of thieves can never be happy because they have no aim in life. The gross materialist thieves have no ultimate goal of life. They are simply directed to sense gratification, nor do they have knowledge or how to perform yagyas. Lord Chaitanya, however, inaugurated the easiest performance of yagya, namely the Sankirtan yagya, which can be performed by anyone in the world who accepts the principles of Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna. So before we continue, I'm going to do an invocation. Amajanitamирandasya gananjana shalakaya chakshur ummalitam yena tasmai Shri Guruve namaha Shri Chaitanya manobishtam shtapitam yena bhutale Svayam rupa kadamayam dadati svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagarajanatam Sagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvektam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Saganana Lalita Shri Vaishnakam Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dino Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorange Radha Vrindavaneshwari Vishnu Bhanu Sute Devi Prananami Hara Hari Priye Panchakalpa Drupascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine
Namaste
Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Prashchacha Desitarine Hare Krishna. All right, so today is July the 9th, 2026, and today I have stories for you of intrigue and drama and maybe even romance if we get there. Okay. So the way I would like to start out today is I'm very inspired by some association I had recently. I had guests in my home and they saw some art on my wall. Let me see if I can share my screen to show you. Let's see here. So they saw art on my wall. And this art was da-da-da-dum. I think I do know how to share clips, portion of screen. Portion of screen. Oh, look at that. Well, it's possible. I feel like I've done this before. Aha. Are we seeing this? Aha. And Asuna says yes.
Yes.
All right.
Very gruesome.
Exactly. So it's being seen in my temple room. And so here I have, Prabhupada on the altar, and I have the parampara and all of these acharyas and beautiful devotees. And then this is very close by. And so my guest asked me, so what's up with this many-armed lion being and what's happening here? And so I respond with enthusiasm, right? And I say, okay, well, I have a story for you. And so this character's name is Nrsimhadeva. And the story is very much about him, but it starts with Hiranyakasipu, right? So Hiranyakasipu did many, many penances and sacrifices and austerities, so much so that the demigods and everybody were like afraid. And I think at some point, and this is ad lib here, right? So forgive me and help me out. But he was given what he wanted, basically, and so he asked for a series of things that had to do with bodily conception of life, right? He didn't want to be able to be killed by a weapon. He didn't want to be able to be killed on the land or in the sky, inside or outside, during the day or at night. And so he was granted these things. And Hiranyakashipu was a king, and king of the world, or king of the universe. Yeah, he had so much power, the demigod shook. Um, and this king, he had a son. His name was Prahlad. Prahlad was very young, five or younger. And so here's this king. He has control of everything that he could want. He has all of the resources, and he has this like guarantee of his existence, basically. And his 5-year-old son, well, his 5-year-old son turns out was worshiping Vishnu. So why is this a problem? Well, Hiranyakashipu had a beef had beef with Vishnu. Hiranyakashipu's brother, there's this pastime where he had kidnapped the goddess of the earth, Bhumi. And when this was done, the demigods asked Vishnu, like, this is a terrible situation. Can you please help? And I won't go into that whole pastime because it's definitely the whole thing. But yeah, Lord Vishnu killed Hiranyakashipu's brother. And so he's got a little bit of a problem with Vishnu, right? So when he finds out that his son is worshiping Vishnu, he's like, how is this happening? Are they teaching you this at school? Right? Like, so his servants go and they check and they're like, no, they're not teaching him it at school. So it's okay, like, don't do this. And then, they continue to watch him. And not only is he worshiping Vishnu, he's teaching the other children to worship Vishnu. And they're like, oh, come on, like, what can we do, right? And so telling him it's not doing any good. Prahlad Maharaj continues. He continues worshiping Vishnu, and Hiranyakashipu gets so upset that now he's plotting to kill his own son. And this looks like so many things, right? Trying to poison him. At some point, I think trying to have someone throw him off of a cliff, and all these different methods and ways do not work. And it's not that Prahlad Maharaj is so clever or so quick, but he's protected. He is protected. And so finally, Hiranyakashipu gets to where he has the last straw, right? Like he can take no more. He's in his palace, and Prahlad Maharaj is there and begins to tell him about Vishnu, and he just loses it, right? He's so angry, so mad, and you could say even murderous. So he's yelling and just berating Prahlad and says, is your God here now? Is he in this pillar? Will he protect you from me? And Prahlad says, yes. Yes, actually he is. And Hiranyakashipu hits the pillar, and there's this crack that feels like it's cracked the world, right? And out of the pillar bursts this personality, which is Nrsimhadeva and is an incarnation of Krishna. And so like an epic battle ensues, and they fight and they fight, and it goes on for so long until the sun is setting. And at this point, Nrsimhadeva gets Hiranyakashipu, and he has him in the doorway of the palace, and he's on his lap, and he rips him open with his nails. And so the end of Hiranyakashipu came neither in the night or the day, neither inside or outside, and it wasn't by a weapon, neither was it by a human or a beast. So, I can relate to these very nice people who are in my house, because I remember not too long ago when I came here and I looked at Dear Govinda's altar, I was looking at everyone very nicely, and I saw Nrsimhadeva in the same picture, and I was like, hey David, what's this about? um, and as I got to know the pastime, the way I originally received it was this story of devotion and protection and shelter and surrender, and how great a personality Prahlad Maharaj, right, at only 5 years old, so respectful and loving of his father, but so clear in what he was doing, and continued despite criticism, despite hardship. And I, felt that's very unreachable for me, really, that level, but admire the pastime. And recently, I understand the pastime in a way that I'm ashamed to say is more relatable, which is as a cautionary tale about Hiranyakashipu, right? Because here we have a personality, he exerted his will to an extreme, where the god said, listen, enough with all of this, right? We'll give you what you want. And he got everything he could want. He had all the resources, he had all of the power, and it was not enough. He couldn't get the obedience from his 5-year-old son, and this was dissatisfying and drove him over the edge and drove him to his end. And so what do I mean about this in my relationship is, where in my life am I not surrendered and thinking, through my exertion of will, I'm going to earn something and I'm going to get something. And how many times have I done this where it's still not enough, right? It's like a cup that has a hole in it. You keep filling it up and there's always going to be something wrong. There's always something. And what a personal hell it must be. I know I've suffered at my hand doing such things, but imagine to the extent of Hiranyakashipu, right? Like to have the entire universe in your palm and to say, no, this isn't enough. I can't imagine such a hell. Or I guess I can only imagine such a hell. So, what do we do if it's not about doing? If it's not about succeeding, if it's not about achieving, if it's not about penances and all this kind of stuff. What led me to this class today is thinking about the difference between satisfaction and gratification. And I'll add the extra word, which is indulgence. And then that's kind of where I was landing, was if satisfaction is to be fulfilled and to say, yeah, I have enough. And I'm good. I don't need any more. And gratification is more like that cup that has a hole in it. And so no matter how much you fill it, it just seems to escape. No matter how much money, no matter how many material possessions, no matter how many relationships, no matter how much food or sex or whatever. And in that way, I think about indulgence in it's never enough, and you continue um, because you can never be satisfied. And thinking about this, I recently read a passage in the Krishna book that I'm going to read to you guys that talks about the senses. So this is in the chapter called Prayers by the Personified Vedas. And it says, Sukadev Goswami replied that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has created the mind, senses, and living force for the purpose of sense gratification in transmigration from one kind of body to another, as well as for the purpose of allowing liberation from the material conditions. In other words, the senses, mind, and living force can be utilized for sense gratification in transmigration from one body to another, or for the matter of liberation. The Vedic injunctions are there just to give the conditioned souls the chance for sense gratification under regulative principles, and thereby also give them the chance for promotion to the higher conditions of life. Ultimately, if the consciousness is purified, one comes to his original position and goes back home, back to Godhead. So that got my interest and piqued me, right? So if the senses can be used for sense gratification, but ultimately are for liberation, this is what we're told. So what does that mean practically? I get it. I get it as practical. I get it as doing the needful. And when I was thinking about it, what came to me is shoes. I don't know, it's just a silly thing, but shoes, right? Not everybody has shoes in the world, but shoes have a purpose and they're for walking. Yet in our age and in our circumstance here, I mean, what if you have 100 pairs of shoes? And at this point, what is it that we're accomplishing? What are we doing? And so in this way, like gratification, overindulgence for something and its use. And if in looking at it this way, I'm looking at my life and I'm thinking, well, I lead a life of indulgence. I have excess in so many regards. So again, practically, what's the answer? What do I do? And to me, and part of this discussion here is yoga, right? So how do we connect? Yoga is to yoke, to connect. Everything that is in this material world to be in service to God. Most people, several people who I might send this video to, they might think of yoga as stretching and breathing, right? Like that's hatha yoga. And I think it's a good example that I want to use as a metaphor. So in hatha yoga, you have these proposed benefits, right? And your purpose there is stretching and breathing. And no matter what your motivation is, maybe you have pain in your body, maybe a friend told you, yeah, like go try this thing, it's so great. So like you're curious, my friend told me, let me go try it. Or maybe like you know that there's a yoga class and there's some really attractive like men and women there. So you're like, I'm gonna be there because there's something there that I want to benefit from. But no matter what your motivation is in going to do it, if you do the practice, you get the benefit, right? You get extended range of motion, control your breathing, mindfulness. Um, and similarly, I want to mention that, if someone is approaching yoga and they happen to be an athlete, or maybe they're a musician, or maybe whatever the case is, they work in an office building. Does it mean that because they do this yoga that they suddenly give up their basketball playing or that they give up being a musician? Like, no, it's an activity that enhances any other activity that they perform in. So as an athlete, maybe they do have the increased range of motion. As a musician, maybe they have better awareness and control of their breath. And as somebody who's in an office building, maybe they have less anxiety now that they've done this yoga, now that they're practicing. So, what is bhakti yoga then, if it's not hatha yoga? What I'm saying here, in a connection that I've made, is that it's similar, but for spirituality. And so, bhakti means devotion, turning towards the self in a mood of discovery, and turning towards God in a mood of devotion. And very similarly, it's a practice of looking at relationship to ourselves, looking at our relationship to each other, and looking at our relationship to God. And no matter the motivation, right? Are you suffering? Do you want some material gain? Or are you just curious? No matter why you approach it, if you do the practice, you get the benefit. And so, again, similarly, it doesn't matter your orientation. Where are you coming from? What is your focus? Maybe you're Christian, maybe you're Jewish, maybe you're Muslim. No matter your orientation, this practice has a benefit and it enhances any other focuses that you have in devotional life, spiritual life. We have some examples that, like David has talked about before, that by practicing bhakti, he became kosher. And so in this way, he's a better Jew. And for me personally, my experience is that through bhakti, I got to have a relationship with mercy and grace and surrender that made it possible for me to talk with and relate with Christians in a way that I was so attached to the power of my will in my life and sheer force of will that I would scoff at godly people whenever they would talk about surrender. And now I speak to Christians at length about Jesus or Yeshua or Jehovah, and I have such a loving time speaking about God. And I really appreciate that it's made me a better Christian and that I have access to these concepts in a way that's like really tangible before it was lost on me. All right, so then what is devotional service, right? What does it mean if we're going to practice bhakti yoga? And I have some examples, right? So we're turning towards the self, other, and God. In the Bhagavad-gita, it describes to us, like, so who am I? Am I this bag of bones and skin and blood and stool? No. Well, well, then what am I? And why am I here? What is suffering? So, to inquire of the self. And as far as other, I appreciate, and these are just snippets. Obviously, they're not like the whole thing, but they're the summaries that came to me in my thinking of like relationship to self, other, and God. For other, what came to me was the nectar of instruction, and there's verse 4 that gives us a little summary of what it means to be in relationship to other. And it says it's both giving and receiving of charity, of food, and inquiring of each other in a way that we reveal ourselves and we allow others to reveal themselves to us. And then in relationship to God, devotion, the nectar of devotion, describes 64 ways of practicing devotion, right? Wow, so many ways, so many options. And it says that if you can take even one sincerely and practice it, you will be purified. And so, what if I can't do 64, right? What if I look at this list and even one of them, like, I don't know, right? Like, I don't know about this. We're told, if there's only one that you can endeavor towards, it's to chant God's names. And so maybe through your practice or your spirituality, you already have names for God. And if you don't, then I have a recommendation, which is the Maha Mantra. And I want to refer to a verse that I don't know incredibly well, and I'm not sure I'll pronounce it correctly, but Harinam, Harinam, Harinam. In this age of Kali, there's no other way, there's no other way, there's no other way. Chant the holy name, chant the holy name, chant the holy name, right? And so whatever that name is to you, it's told to us by the Vedas, in the Vedas, that of all of the yagas, of all the sacrifices, this is the one that we can do that will really save us, right? And what a gift in this age of quarrel and of strife and hardship, where people are dull and have short lives and are struggling. We're given something that's so accessible to us. So, what is the Maha Mantra? It's 3 names of God repeated in a succession of 16 words. And so those 3 words are Hare, Krishna, and Rama. Hare is the spiritual energy of God, and Krishna means like all attractive, and Rama is the reservoir of all pleasure. And so in repeating these words, we're addressing the Supreme, the Divine, God, Krishna. I want to read another part of that same chapter. It's a very long chapter in the Krishna book, but it talks about God. Ato Brahma Jigyasya. What is the nature of the absolute truth? The next sutra answers that the nature of the absolute truth is that he is the origin of everything. Whatever we experience, even in this material condition of life, is but an emanation from him. The absolute truth created the mind and senses and intelligence. This means that the absolute truth is not without mind, intelligence, and senses. In other words, he is not impersonal. The very word created means that he has transcendental intelligence. For example, when the father begets a child, the child has senses because the father also has senses. The child is born with hands and legs because the father also has hands and legs. Sometimes it's said, therefore, that man is made after the image of God. The absolute truth is therefore the supreme personality with transcendental mind, senses, and intelligence. When one's mind, intelligence, and senses are purified of material contamination, one can understand the original feature of the absolute truth as a person. So God as a person has a name, and if we call him by his name, things go a lot better for us rather than saying God, for example. It'd be like someone saying, "Hey, you, hey, person, I want to talk to you." Right? It doesn't feel very good. It doesn't really hit home. You're like, what's happening here? Who are you? Um, and so in this way, we refer to God. And God is not different than his name. So whenever we say the names of God, we're actually having his association with us. He's here. He's with us. Our time to be with our loving Father. And there's no rules for when you can say God's names. You can do it when you're crocheting. You can do it when you're playing tennis. You can do it when you're driving. And I know for me, my practice began when I was invited to my first ever bhakti discussion, and we chanted as a group. I'd never chanted this before, the Hare Krishna mantra. And after we chanted one round together as a group, I felt peace and quiet and stillness for the first time in a very long time. And so I thought, well, I don't really understand, and it doesn't matter. I will continue because, there's that attraction. And there's
the first visit to Prabhupada.
Yeah. And so after that visit, I was given, japa beads. I was given a japa bag, and it was on my mind. And I will say, like, I wasn't exactly steady, but it left an impression on me. And so this is my point now, is like, how do you know, right? There's so many religions, there's so many practices, there's so many things that say the light is here or there. And I was listening to a lecture, Prabhupada, where one of the devotees asked Prabhupada that, like, so many different practices describe like the light coming in, and the light comes from here or there, this God or that God. And it's like, how do you know that you're following the right light? And Prabhupada said it's very practical. Like, the darkness has gone away. You could see light. And so same thing, like, if a man is eaten and you say, well, how do you understand you're not hungry anymore? I feel satisfied. I feel that I'm not hungry. And so how do you know if you are chanting the names of God, if you're doing the right practice, if you're in the right place? My answer to that is that it's an experiential process. You will feel it, as I described feeling it. And each person's process may be different. Bhakti is called the science of self-realization. And in this way, it's not an imposition on the mind. It's not me telling you have to do anything, but it is like, try it, give it a try, see how you feel. And it's a purificatory process. And from there, you can make your choices for yourself. So we were talking about gratification and satisfaction and indulgence. Before I open things up for people and questions, there's another exploration I wanted to ask, which is, who gets to decide what's enough, right? So, like, how much sleep, how much do you eat? How many things do you have? Like, what is your life? What are your things? And in considering that, like I said earlier, like, if I look at my life, I feel like it's pretty indulgent. So I'm not gonna throw it all out the window and go, like, meditate on a mountain like Arjuna is considering, right? That's not the answer. So then who gets to decide? And what came to me as a thought, and I'm opening a discussion for this soon, which is, it's not a prescription, it's a relationship, right? And so there are some general concepts of, for example, people usually can be refreshed with 6 or 7 hours of sleep, right? In general, like, you know, we have in America like this concept of 3 meals a day. And so there's like these general standards, but this body, per time, place, and circumstance, I might need more sleep today than the body of Aditya, than the body of Anasuya. Um, and so it isn't a prescription, it's a relationship. And so what does that mean? Well, I'm conscious, and it's my responsibility to be aware, consciousness of my relationship with these things and be honest. No one else is in this body, right? Looking at these things to be honest. And in consideration of this too, I was reading a book by Mukunda Das called Miracle on Second Avenue, and he's describing pastimes with Prabhupada in like early discipleship, like 1966, and like some of the years past that in New York and San Francisco and London. And he had posed a question to Prabhupada, like, how much sleep should you have? And Prabhupada, according to his pastime, said, sleep until you're refreshed, right? So again, so practical. And in so many instances I've read or heard where Prabhupada said, do the needful when it comes to different things. So it's our judgment. And at the same time, it's very possible to be like grungy about it and be like, yeah, I need 12 hours of sleep every day. Like it's the only way I can get by. And maybe not. Like, are we really being honest with ourselves? Time, place, and circumstance. And so with that in consideration of satisfaction, gratification, and indulgence, I was listening to another lecture of Prabhupada where he said, we're all on the path to liberation, moksha, and we haven't arrived. So it's a purificatory process. We're all in the process of purification. And I know that I have varying degrees of success, right? So even in preparing for this class, I was having prashad and I had maybe a little bit too much homemade hummus and chips because I was like emotionally coping while I was reading and thinking about what I would say. And, you know, I indulged in another way, which is very common for me. I'm like, force of will. And I stayed up really late last night, like looking at my notes and looking at these different things because I'm indulging in a sense of control that I can like make this class better somehow by force. Um, and I'm not proud of those, but I am conscious and I'm more conscious than I have been. And that's the beginning. So I do want to tell one last story, and I won't tell it so well or so long as the Nrsimhadev story, but recently I was in a Bhagavatam class where we heard the story of Ajamila. And so I take it as another tale, both of caution and of hope, in regards to sense gratification. So Ajamil was a devotee and he had a spiritual practice. And he was walking through a forest one day and he got distracted by something he couldn't get out of his head. And he couldn't look away, he didn't look away, and it took over his life, where he left his wife and his kids. He stopped supporting his parents and he indulged in this thing until he was an old man. And as an old man, he had had children and they had spiritual names. And so he's on his deathbed and he has a very young son named Narayan. And so he's dying and he calls out for his young son, Narayan, Narayan, Narayan. And because of this, because at his death he was calling the names of God, the servants of Vishnu came for him and didn't allow the servants of Yamaraj to take him to like hellish planets. And so, what am I telling you this for, right? So like, yeah, don't worry about saying the names of God until you die. Like, just do it then. You're gonna be golden. But like, I'm not gonna have a child named Narayan. And I mean, he had his practice earlier in life, and it's the only reason why his children had spiritual names, and it's the only reason why he said it at the time of his death. And so for me, my focus and my thought is practice as much as I can now, because I don't know what condition I'll be in and when that time is coming. And hopefully, I can remember the names of God. And on that note, I want to read you guys another thing from the Interior Castle, Saint Teresa of Avila. So there's this one paragraph here that I found so inspiring for chanting of God's names. I'm going to read it to you. As far as I can understand, the door of entry into this castle is prayer and meditation. I do not say mental prayer rather than vocal, for if it is prayer at all, it must be accompanied by meditation. If a person does not think whom he is addressing and what he is asking for, and who it is that is asking, and of whom he is asking it, I do not consider that he is praying at all, even though he be constantly moving his lips. True, it is sometimes possible to pray without paying heed to these things, but that is only because they have been thought about previously. If a man is in the habit of speaking to God's majesty as he would speak to a slave, and never wonders if he is expressing himself properly, but merely utters the words that come to his lips because he has learned them by heart through constant repetition, I do not call that prayer at all. And God grant no Christian may ever speak to him so. At any rate, sisters, I hope in God that none of you will, for we are accustomed to talk about interior matters, and that is a good way of keeping oneself falling into such animal-like habits. And now the very last thing I'll say, I might do something unorthodox and ask for Dear Govinda's help here, but what if you don't have a taste, right? And you don't care to increase these relationships that I was just discussing. Maybe you're not interested in having a relationship with God and repeating God's names. It doesn't seem attractive to you. The thing about bhakti and the thing about this practice is it's about service. And so if you don't feel like serving God, there's more for you. If you don't feel like serving God, you can serve. I can't say it the way you do, Prabhu. Would you mind?
What's the line here?
So I've heard you say so many times in classes. So if serving God doesn't call to you, then just serve something like greater than yourself.
Right? Look, reference in Bhagavad-gita chapter 12. Krishna gives a hierarchy. And the top of the hierarchy, that's 12.8. Spontaneous, loving, devotional service to Krishna. You're not able to do that. Okay, do sadhana bhakti, which is basically what we try to practice. Not able to do that, do karma yoga, not any good. And at some point he goes, okay, even if like nothing spiritual, just serve something higher than yourself. Serve your nation, serve your community. And that's going to be bigger than animal life, where it's just like concentrated sense gratification. Of course, even most animals, they're going to serve like their children, things like that. But serve something bigger than yourself, and that will gradually lead to like, okay, well, who's the boss of the boss, like that. So yeah, that's a hierarchy given in Bhagavad Gita. Just serve something bigger than yourself. That's recommended.
Okay, Krishna, thank you, Prabhu. All right, I think that's a very good place to end. And I open it now for any thoughts, any feelings, any discussion. Maybe you guys want to reference other verses, other books, other literature. I'd love to hear from you. All right, I got a chat. What came to mind from Aditya? What came to mind when you mentioned surrender is that the Sanskrit word saranagati, surrender, doesn't really have a true English equivalent that captures its full depth and mood as presented in the Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic scriptures. As a result, the English word surrender is often understood with a negative connotation, implying defeat, loss, or helplessness. In contrast, Saranagati refers to a voluntary, loving, and trust-filled act of taking complete shelter in the divine. Teacher Prabhu, thank you so much for that. That's beautiful. I didn't know that.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
And just in here, you're reading what each wrote. I'm noticing that and it's probably not an accident. There's the same root in Sharanagati, Sharana, with surrender, the SRN root. I'm thinking that's probably not a coincidence. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
I appreciate your sharing, Aditya, because my personal experience, I can relate with that. So, not only was I so much attached to my will and ability and capability in my life, but the thought of surrender always had the connotation of being less than, being overlorded or controlled or manipulated, and this, that, and the other. And so in approaching bhakti, when I would read in the text talking about surrender and grace and mercy, I was so resistant, so hesitant, because it felt dangerous. It felt scary. I was fearful. What does this mean? And so yes, your the definition of Sharanagati is very much what I feel and maybe understand a little bit of now. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Rasamrta. Thank you, Aditya. I was just thinking about our recent exercise given to us by Mother Melanie. Some of us are in this bhakti sanctuary and studying the Srimad Bhagavatam. And so she gave us a questionnaire to discover your Varna. And I had a really wonderful exchange with Vijay Lakshmi. And we did the test, and we both found our tendency was to be a Sudra. And I really liked our conversation because, just as Aditya explained more robustly about surrender, I got to hear a little bit more about the caste system from Vijay Lakshmi. And she said it's very present in India today still. She's like her son applying for college. One of the questions is, what caste are you in? And she's like, what? I'm so like surprised by this. And so, yeah, so culturally, there's this huge difference. I'm thinking this is like ancient wisdom. This Varna ashram system is more just for me to kind of grasp what my qualities are. And yet there's a place that today presently goes by this system and categorization, and I was dumbstruck by it, and I was like, wow. So it was very enlivening in the discussion that we had, and I felt like it's part of kind of somewhat connected, because I like how there's separation and there's also inclusivity. So it's like that simultaneously one and different. It's like, okay, so we all have these different propensities, and how do I best want to show up to serve? And I don't need to show up differently. I can be myself, and jointly we can serve together. And so I liked how at the end of the inventory, it says, use your faithful service, care, and devotion directly at his lotus feet. And someone else who's a Vaishya is use your creativity, resources, and practicality to sustain his mission. And the Sastriyas use your strength, courage, and leadership in his service. And for the Brahmin, it's use your love of knowledge and truth to show Krishna more deeply. And then I had an exchange with Gauri Bhavani and Anandini, our triad. We had another exercise. And so they shared what theirs were. And so it was fun to say one was a Sastriya, one was a Brahmin. And it was like, so it's just it's just been a really rich week of conversation and association. And it feels like I'm opening up to different explorations and not making myself wrong about how I am, how I show up, and what my strengths and qualities are, and how together we make this beautiful service to Srila Prabhupada and carrying out Lord Chaitanya's mission. And it looks different. And it looks different for each of us. And so when you said leading a life of indulgence versus being satisfied with life just the way it is, I think it's also a little bit of that too. It's a little bit of, yeah, let me indulge in these the service that I want in a joyful mood of celebrating and and appreciating everyone else's way of how they show up in their service. And so I don't know, I guess I'm just rambling on here, but I'm just excited from everything that's transpired up until this point, and really happy to be with you this morning. And then, yeah, we're going to have service today at Prabhupada's house. We're going to be receiving Lakshmi Priya's parents and giving prasadam, and we're going to have some guests. And I know it's going to be a God conscious conversation. And her parents are Catholic. I was raised in a Catholic family, so I see this as helping me to show up as I am fully and not hiding and just being completely open about love of God and what we're doing in our service. This is my first opportunity ever to have met Lakshmi Priya's parents. I've never talked to them on the phone. I've never had any, interaction with them. So yeah, I'm just feeling like this is very, very supportive of giving me the strength of how I want to show up today. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So yeah, thank you so much for your sharing. Yeah, I get that um you have this enthusiasm for the recent classes with Mother Malini, and that it's really connecting to relationship, right? So you're surprised you have this like inventory where you get to look at yourself and maybe your qualities and how you show up, and it's not just an inventory for your personal like knowledge, but there's a whole a system and a place where they like this is a major part of like the social structures, these considerations, and what is your relationship with how you show up, right? And it's considered and it's weighed, and it's surprising and yeah. Mm. Also, I thinking about what you said about the indulgence, right? Leading a life of indulgence. What came up for me is immediate concern of like, I hope I connected the dots well, that the point in yoga is to just connect it all in service. And by your sharing, I get that that's what you guys are doing, right? Um, Bhakti doesn't mean poverty. It doesn't mean like being up on a hill and meditating. It's taking everything and it being in service to God and connecting it that way. Again, another lecture that I heard from Prabhupada, I'm pretty sure he says this in probably several, was that, there um, there should be practitioners in every facet in this world, whether it's politics, whether it's whatever endeavor, right? And what does that look like? That looks like using the material resources that are allotted to us. And I get that you and Lakshmi Priya are doing that in service and bringing God consciousness and raising consciousness, raising awareness. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
Is there any other sharing, feelings, thoughts, experiences? Mm. I'll say that preparing for these classes is a little bit of a yagya, and I get some little bit more of understanding whenever I do it. And I'm so grateful, even if I fumble and I stumble and whatever's going on. But what's coming up for me at the moment is the same thing we were just talking about, which is like stepping into your power, stepping into your love. And it's not just about material resources either. We have Paramatma, right, seated in our hearts, and we have inspiration, and we have these things that come to us, and listening to our temperament, our tendency, the things that inspire us, because these are our gifts, and they don't come from nothing, right? Like Prabhupada said in the Purport, the rice and the bread and the grain and the minerals, they don't come from the government, they come of God. And so our inspirations and our super soul inspiration, it comes from him. So if there's no other sharings, I will read the verse again and we'll close. Chapter 3, text 12. Ishtan Bhogan Hivo Deva Dashyanti Yagyabhavita Terdatan Apar Dayabyo Yo Mukti Stena Evasha. In charge of the various necessities of life, the demigods, being satisfied by the performance of yagya sacrifice, supply all necessities to man. But he who enjoys these gifts without offering them to the demigods in return is certainly a thief. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Jai.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thanks for the
Krishna.
inspiration.
Thank you, Rukmini. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Rasamrta.
Thank you.
Immersion. Yes, much purification.